Okay. And so, these are the rules for submitting questions. They're after the during the talk and after the talk. Again, the different rules, whether you're here in the room or on Zoom. And assuming nobody has any questions on those, are we ready to press on, Barry?
So, okay.
And so for you people at home, you can, I'm sure, appreciate the fact that these hybrid meetings aren't as simple as either an in-person meeting or a Zoom only. It's trying to coordinate the technologies and the laptops, because we need to run 2 or 3 laptops to make this happen. Okay, without further ado, and let me cordially welcome Sejal Choksi-Chugh, the executive director of Baykeeper, San Francisco Baykeeper. And I will admit that I had prepared to read through her bio, her background, and I can, but it's on another file here in this computer, which means I need to screw the whole thing up. So I'm going to semi-wing it and let her fill in the key parts of it before she gives her talk. I think one of the key parts that I believe, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, is I think, and did you say that you live in Lafayette? Okay, and so she's a neighbor of ours. And I think you also said you're on the board for Sustainable Lafayette. And so she's another partner organization with ours. And she has a JD in environmental law from UC Berkeley. And has been with Baykeeper, I believe, since 2005, 2002. I was close. I was close. And I think with that, we're going to turn over to Sejal.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Okay, I can do that.
Okay, now.
On. Yeah, the Bay Nature Local Heroes Award, they were kind enough to recognize my 20 years of work in the field and gave me a really nice award last year for a conservation hero. And Bay Nature, yeah. Hello, everyone.
You probably could take your mask off if you wanted to.
Yeah, do you think that's okay? Should I take mask off? All right, here we go. Okay, socially distanced. I love it. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. And thanks so much for the nice welcome, Brad. I will add one thing that you forgot is my mother lives in Rossmore and she's here tonight. She just moved in August during COVID, last August during COVID. So when I asked her where the event center was, she was like, I think I've seen that, but I haven't actually gotten to go there yet. So here we are in this beautiful room and my mom is here and hopefully we'll be proud of my talk tonight. Yay. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And I want to just first say the reason my mom is here is because I am just so warmed by the community in Rossmore. I've always admired this facility and your community here because it's such a nice way to spend your time together and work on projects together. And Sustainable Rossmore is especially near and dear to my heart just because I am on the board of Sustainable Lafayette and it's a wonderful organization for Lafayette, and I'm really glad to see that there's a similar organization here at Rossmore and that you guys are working on such important issues. So thank you so much. And thank you for having me here tonight. So as Brad mentioned, we are going to be working with technology and hopefully it works smoothly. As my presentation is loading, I wanted to get a show of hands online and in the room for who's heard of Baykeeper before? Anyone? Oh wow. I love it. Thank you. Usually I don't get that many hands raised, only because we have been around 30 years, but we've been heads down working really hard, not really marketing ourselves. So hopefully that's changing with these kinds of presentations and also with a lot of the work that we've been doing recently. And I wanted to start off by showing you guys a beautiful picture of the bay, which is why we're here tonight to talk about how Baykeeper protects the bay. We are a pretty unique organization. So for those of you who have heard about us, I hope you'll still learn something tonight. And you'll hopefully learn how we are different from a lot of the other environmental organizations. So I have a pop quiz for you first, of course, to get you all engaged. So raise your hand if you think the following statement is true. San Francisco Bay looks beautiful, so it must be healthy. Raise your hand. Oh, see one hand in the audience. Oh, I see some thumbs downs. All right, next one. Laws to protect the bay are strong. Raise your hand if you think that's true. All right. Some hands raised. Last one, government agencies protect the bay. Raise your hand if you think that's true. I see some, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all. Most of you have passed with flying colors because I'm here to explain why these in principle are not exactly true. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. And I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. So first of all, I wanted to share a little bit about San Francisco Bay with you. We have more than 7 million people who live around the Bay. And that means more than 86 different cities with their storm drain systems that drain into San Francisco Bay. It also means lots of sewage treatment plants around the Bay. More than 1,600 industrial facilities operate around the Bay. We've got 5 oil refineries, 380 vessels every day transport across the Bay, different things, including people. And then this is a new stat. There are more than 1,100 toxic sites around the Bay, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but these are all toxic sites that are low-lying on the shoreline that are probably going to be inundated by sea level rise because we're expecting about a 7-foot rise in sea level over the next 100 years. So all of that adds up to a lot of threats to San Francisco Bay. So when we see the Bay and we see how beautiful it is, it really is important that we understand that the Bay is an urban environment and we all have an impact on it, even if we don't want to. There is an impact that happens from it being an urban estuary. And so part of what Baykeeper does is work to protect the Bay from all of these different threats. We are scientists, lawyers, advocates, and skippers defending San Francisco Bay from threats and holding polluters and government agencies accountable. So you guys have saw the boat at the beginning. That's my favorite part of Baykeeper. We investigate pollution using the drone and the boat and obviously field ops. We've got a kayak that we use as well. We stop polluters when we find pollution. We strengthen those laws that need to be stronger. And we're fighting for communities and defending the Bay and helping it be more resilient. And that's because we really believe in a few core principles that I'm going to go over today. So first of all, we believe that pollution needs to be investigated. I'll tell a little story about each of these. So you can see here down at the bottom that photo of our staff scientist Ian leaning down into the water to collect whatever that red pollution is right there. We were on a boat patrol. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. And we noticed this plume of water in the bay right near San Francisco. And we had no idea where it was coming from. So we followed it upstream. And it turns out that it was coming from a facility right on San Francisco Bay's shoreline. This was the BAE ship breaking and ship maintenance facility. And this red plume, as soon as Ian saw it, he said, "Oh, I better see what that is." So he's grabbing a sample there in that photo. Turns out that it was really high in lead, copper, and other heavy metals. And that indicates that it was probably paint. It was red paint. So we investigated, we researched that facility, BAE, and found out that they had many, many violations under the Clean Water Act. But what they were doing was filing their reports annually that they're required to file under the Clean Water Act. And the government agency who received those reports back in the olden days was sticking them in a filing cabinet, shutting the door and not really looking at them. So Baykeeper's attorneys went through all of those files, basically decades of information that was from the facility, and we found thousands of violations of the Clean Water Act. So we knew that this was not their first and only offense. And so we held that facility accountable. We filed a lawsuit under the Clean Water Act, and that company came into compliance and said, "Oh, we had no idea we were violating the law. Thank you so much for telling us," and proceeded to put in place measures that would not allow the paint while they were working off of these boats to get into the water. I mean, it was a pretty basic solution that they needed to install, and they just hadn't taken the time or spent the money to install the protective measures to keep this toxic stuff out of the bay. So that's one way in which we helped protect the bay, and we are around the bay every day looking for polluting activities. And now that we've expanded to our drone, which is what happened over COVID, we actually can see facilities from the top, not just from the water. And it's really opened up our ability to see what facilities are doing all around the bay. So it's really increased our ability to hold them accountable. So we also believe that polluters and government agencies should be held accountable. Who here agrees with that statement? We'd think anybody who's environmentally minded would hopefully agree that we should not have polluting companies around the bay. But surprisingly, we also have the federal government and other government agencies harming the bay. One example of this, you guys might be familiar with the ghost fleet that used to be stored up in Benicia. Raise your hand if you do know that ghost fleet. Yeah, I see lots of hands raised. Okay, so these were all of the old military vessels that were being stored there by MARAD. It's a federal maritime agency. And basically it was all of the military vessels that were no longer in use because they were old and falling apart and they couldn't really go into war anymore. So rather than dismantle them and recycle them, the federal government said, well, let's just hold on to them. So we're going to store them in different parts of the country. And so there are many areas where there are these ghost fleets. And those turned out that there was a NOAA report back in 2008, 2009, that showed that there were 20,000 tons of heavy metals coming off of the ghost fleet and into San Francisco Bay, 20,000 tons. And that included toxic metals, it included PCBs and other really harmful chemicals, and a lot of liquids and fluids that were still residual on the boats. And all of that was just getting into the bay and really harming the fish in the area and harming the people who are fishing out of the bay. A lot of people fish up in that area. So we said, well, how is the federal government allowed to store these old cranky boats up there and not follow its own law? I mean, the Clean Water Act is a federal law that they should be complying with. And so we held the federal government accountable. We said, you can't pollute our bay that way. And you certainly shouldn't be storing these ships there without any sort of cleaning mechanism or protective measures. And the federal government actually agreed. We didn't even have to really, we filed a lawsuit, but we didn't really have to take them to court because they realized what they were doing pretty quickly was wrong. So they ended up working with us to identify the worst polluting ships. There were 57 of them. And back 2 years ago, the last vessel was towed out of San Francisco Bay and taken to a recycling center. And it was reused for really important other purposes. And my favorite part of that story is actually the federal government decided that not only were they going to clean up this ghost fleet in San Francisco Bay, but because we showed them what was possible, they actually decided to clean up their ghost fleets all around the country. So little old Baykeeper had a big impact all over the country, which is kind of cool. Yay. Some cheers in the audience. I love it. Baykeeper, we also believe that laws must be strong enough to protect wildlife and people. So how many of you guys remember the 2007 Costco Busan oil spill that happened in the Bay? Okay, it was pretty catastrophic. I remember it very vividly, and I even remember where I was when I heard about it. I was at the dentist, and there is no place I'd rather be, right? No, I'm just kidding. Who wants to be at the dentist? But the one call I didn't want to get was a big oil spill on the bay. So I got that call, and they were telling me that there was an collision with the Bay Bridge. So this boat had collided into the Bay Bridge, and there was a spill. And I asked, well, how much do they estimate it is? And the reporter on the phone said, they think it's about 400 gallons. That's what the Coast Guard is telling us. That's what the Costco Busan owners are telling us. And I said, well, okay, that's bad, but it's not terrible. Like that's controllable. So if they can get protective gear out on the bay, they'll be able to contain that and keep it in. So about 30 minutes later, I got a call from our head skipper, and he said, Sejal, I'm free. Do you want me to go out on the boat and just check it out and see what's going on? And I was like, sure. You love going out on the boat anyway. You might as well put you to good use. So he went out there, and about an hour later, he called me and he said, this doesn't look like 400 gallons, because if it was 400 gallons, it would not be in XYZ places. And that's where I'm seeing all this oil has already spread. And so I called the Coast Guard. I had my staff calling around. We were just getting more information, and we kept asking everyone, well, how's this just a 400-gallon spill? Because the oil has spread too far. And sure enough, 8 hours later, the Coast Guard comes to the media and says, oops, we made a mistake. We estimated it was 400 gallons, but it was actually 53,000 gallons. And by the time that revised estimate came out, it was too late to control any of that oil and get it out of the water. So it proceeded to coat 50 Bay Area beaches, so to the point where the beaches had to be closed. It also proceeded to kill thousands of birds and wildlife. And we are still, to this day, trying to figure out the full impacts of all of that oil. So after that oil spill happened, we realized that there really were not strong enough laws to protect the bay from these kinds of things. And the prevention measures that took place right after, the response measures that took place right after were not strong enough either, because that oil should not have reached to those beaches. And those local communities should have been warned in advance. So none of the local cities were warned in advance because everybody thought it was a 400-gallon spill. They didn't have the equipment to protect their beaches. And we ended up sitting down with the Coast Guard for 6 months in a rehash of the entire event. And we identified 191 ways in which the laws needed to be stronger in order to protect San Francisco Bay. So we ended up actually passing 14 of those laws in the last 5 years. And we're still working on implementing some of the other changes with the agencies. So we Baykeeper sits on a task force that works with the oil spill response agencies now, and we are continuously monitoring the bay for these kinds of spills to ensure that they don't happen. We're also working really hard to try to keep these oil tankers off of the bay and keep the cargo ships traveling safer on the bay. So a lot of work still to be done there. We also believe that everyone has a right to clean water and a healthy bay. And one of the ways that we manifest this belief is by helping communities fight toxic coal from being imported into the Bay Area and exported through Bay Area facilities. So I don't know if have people heard about the Richmond coal facility and the fight in Oakland that's happening about the coal exports? Yeah. So about 6 years ago, I got a call from our John, our one of our Utah water keepers. And he said, hey, I'm just seeing a news story in my local paper that says that 4 counties in Utah are approving $53 million for an export facility, a bulk export facility in Oakland. And he's like, what do you know about that? And I was like, this is the first I've heard about that. But what the heck do Utah counties care about Oakland and an export facility for? And so we sat there and pieced together what was happening. And turns out these coal counties were trying to export 11 million tons of coal out of the Bay Area. And they were very underhandedly doing it by saying that they're going to be a bulk export facility and only listing things like grains, wheat and other commodities like that were going to go out of this facility. And so we said, well, that's first of all lying. And second of all, have you gotten permission from the city of Oakland to do this? So we raised it with the city of Oakland along with our partners at the Sierra Club. And we said, hey, city council, did you guys know this was happening? And they were like, we had no idea. So the city council tried to revoke the contract for building this export terminal. And they were taken to court by the developer. Baykeeper, our attorneys went into court to defend the city and its right to regulate this kind of toxic material coming into their site. Because we knew from our experience in Richmond, which is the only coal terminal that exports coal right now, that it's a dirty, polluting commodity that really makes a big mess in the community and causes incredible health problems. So just in the last year, we were able to work with Richmond to pass a ban on coal storage in their city. And that also was challenged by the coal industry in court. So Baykeeper is in court right now, also defending that ban. And we are hopefully helping the city of Richmond and the city of Oakland protect their community from toxic coal imports. So who knows where Utah is going to go next? Actually, I do know where they might go next. They're actually trying up in Humboldt County. They're trying to build their export facility up there now. So we're working with our Humboldt Baykeeper to stop that from happening. We're giving them the experience that sharing our experience with them so that they can kind of see how to stop it up there. So exports of coal are bad. And then finally, we've got technology. There we go. We believe that we can help the Bay be more resilient to climate change. How many of you guys are familiar with the Cargill salt ponds down in the South Bay? Yes. So a few years ago, we heard rumors that Cargill was trying to develop those salt ponds. And then they had a friend in the federal government who said, yeah, you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. And so Trump's EPA actually ended up saying, these ponds are not water, they're land. And that cleared the way for Cargill to be able to develop them. So we took a look at that decision by the Trump administration and we said, well, that's ridiculous. Ponds are not land. And we decided to take our chances in court. So we took the Trump administration and Cargill to court 2 years ago. And sure enough, last December, the judge agreed and said, ponds are wet and ponds, I mean, literally the court ruling says ponds are wet and these ponds are connected to the bay, so they must be protected by the Clean Water Act. So that action was able to protect over 1,300 acres of salt ponds that hopefully will now be transitioned into their natural state, which are marshes and wetlands. That's going to be super important for protecting the shorelines in the South Bay from sea level rise. So there are a number of different areas where we are working on wetlands restoration projects like that. And, you know, this flows when this resilience category, I could tell a lot of different stories here. There's sand mining happening in the bay. There are too many water diversions happening out of the bay. You guys may have seen the press recently about smelt and salmon dying to extinction, probably in the next few years, which, you know, is shocking to think about such important keystone species being gone in our lifetime. And our staff is working on those issues to try to prevent that from happening right now. So lots of stories I could tell about that one, but I don't want to cut into our Q&A time. So overall, we believe that no one should be able to hurt our beautiful San Francisco Bay. We've had 30 years of impact. We've patrolled and investigated polluters more than 16,000 hours. We've had more than 290 legal victories. We have helped cities around the Bay reduce sewage spills. We've blocked 3 coal facilities. We've cleaned up Point Malate, which is the only beautiful beach in Richmond that is now a public beach. We helped pass those 14 new laws after the Costco-Busan oil spill. We helped protect those 1,300 acres of salt ponds. And just for those of you who are curious, whenever we win a lawsuit, we don't get the money from that lawsuit. We send it to nonprofits that are working to protect and restore the Bay. So there's nothing but a win in it for us. You can get involved. You can sign up for our news and our action alerts. Right now, we've got some action alerts on asking Governor Newsom to help with the drought and the water diversions that are happening that are hurting the salmon. If you see pollution, you can also report it to us. And you can be an ambassador. So if you're interested in joining our leadership, you can email at this address and get some more information. We're always looking for people who love the Bay and people who have expertise in some way or who want to introduce us to their networks. And my favorite, if you like wine, you can drink rosé for the Bay. This is a wine that is produced for us by Obsidian Wine Company, and 100% of the proceeds come to San Francisco Baykeeper. And it's delicious. Perfect for summertime. All right. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
I'll go on mute. Go.
So I don't see any questions yet on the chat, but there's a question or two here in the room. And the first question is, who is responsible to restore the Cargill salt ponds to wetlands?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it involves a lot of different entities. There are regulatory decisions that need to be made in terms of permits and Clean Water Act compliance. So it involves both the federal government and local government, like the Bay Conservation and Development Commission and the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of different agencies that have a hand in deciding how to maintain those salt ponds. And then it's really a lot up to the local cities as well. So the local cities can protect those salt ponds if they want to. They can say that those have to be restored back to wetlands. And it's just a matter of advocating for those, for Redwood City and Newark and those other areas down there to really have the political will to make that decision. Because, you know, if you've got a developer willing to pay money to fill in all of those salt ponds and build luxury condos, sometimes it's hard for certain city council members to say no to that kind of a lucrative deal. But that's basically what's on the table right now. They're talking about filling in those wetlands with dirt and then paving them over and building luxury condos and commercial real estate, which is really devastating.
Okay.
Yes. Oh.
Okay.
I think
I'm
got
sorry.
a
Yeah.
live question.
Uh,
I remember hearing about 3 Berkeley women that were very concerned about filling in the bay.
Yeah.
And started an organization with that was Save the Bay.
Yes.
How do you work with them?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that question. So there are lots of different environmental organizations that work to protect the bay. And like I said, Baykeeper is really unique. So Save the Bay is a partner of ours, and we work with them really closely on the salt ponds restoration work and a lot of restoration work around the bay. They, I would say, are really focused on policy advocacy and shoreline restoration. So they have very good hands-on projects that help protect the bay to pull out pull out invasive weeds and things and plant natives. And they also have a great education program that's wonderful for kids and outreach. We don't do that kind of kids education, outreach, shoreline restoration work. Our purview is really finding those polluters and holding them accountable and making sure that the government is protecting the bay. So it's very separate, different niches. And in fact, Sylvia McLaughlin is one of the founding members of Save the Bay and actually helped also found.
Okay, Dave and Amanda Casey asked a couple of questions. The first is, did the boatyard pay a penalty for prior spills and violations?
Yes. So almost all of our defendants, when they're caught polluting, we do force them to pay a penalty for past violations of the Clean Water Act. This is a penalty to help somewhat mitigate for all of the harm that their pollution caused the bay. And in that instance, the money went to the Spalding boatyard up in the North Bay and helped them create an education and boat repair facility up there. So that was a pretty cool penalty that we were able to redirect to a nonprofit.
Okay, are there volunteer roles at Baykeeper?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, it is challenging because we do legal work. We do a lot of science work. We're very technical. So it is hard to find great spaces for volunteers. So I'd say there are 3 main ways you can volunteer. One, we do have events and trash cleanups to help raise awareness and get people out there. So we often will do trash cleanups to keep all of this yucky stuff out of our bay. And then we've also got our pollution hotline. So we want eyes and ears on the water whenever you're out hiking or kayaking near the water. We really do want you to use our hotline. And then the third way, like I said, is we're looking for ambassadors, always looking for ambassadors to help share the word about Baykeeper and raise awareness about our work.
How is Baykeeper funded?
So we are funded by individual donors. In fact, Sustainable Rossmore is a donor of ours. Thank you guys so much for supporting our work. And individuals and then foundations. We also do get reimbursed sometimes for our attorney's work. So sometimes if we've got either a scientist as an expert in court or attorneys representing us in court, if we are lucky enough to win that case, and if we are lucky enough to have the judgment in our favor, we can sometimes get fees recovered. So it's a number of different ways that we're.
Marilyn Schiller asks, is the fish in the San Francisco Bay safe to eat?
Oh, I get that question a lot, and it's really challenging to answer. So it depends on what kind of fish. The smaller the fish, probably the less polluted it's going to be. And it also depends on the parts of the fish that you're eating. There are certain toxins like mercury and DDT and other harmful metals that accumulate in certain parts of the fish. They can accumulate either in the muscle or in the other tissue. So it's a hard question to answer. Usually what we recommend is not to eat fish too frequently out of the bay. So if you're limiting your intake to just a couple of times a month, you should be fine. Obviously, if you are pregnant or have other immunocompromised situation, you should consult your doctor.
How do you stay so upbeat in the face of so many polluters? Dave and Amanda Casey ask.
That's such a nice question. Thanks for thinking I'm upbeat. I do feel upbeat when I get to meet folks who really care about our work and care about the Bay. So that energizes me for sure. And I think because I've been a Baykeeper for 20 years, I've been able to see the long view. You know, it's not just about the one loss or the one victory. It's really about the impact that we've been able to make over the last 20 years because of our experts and because of our really hard work. So we're really strategic. We make sure that we're focused on the biggest threats. And then I love sicking my lawyers and scientists on threats to try to really solve them. And we do make an impact. So that's how I can stay optimistic.
One card question here. I don't understand, but it says San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. Is there a question there? What? To explain what? Oh.
Yeah,
Thank
so the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority is a conglomeration of different agencies and entities who work to restore the Bay. I would say it's similar. We partner with them when there are issues that we can work on together, usually wetlands restoration projects, things like that. Right now, we are in court fighting the Army Corps of Engineers because the Army Corps of Engineers dredges a big portion of the Bay, and they have to because we want to get these big ships in. Although if it were up to Baykeeper, we would keep those big ships like the oil tankers out. But we know that in order for them to traverse the Bay safely, they really have to have the deeper channels. And so we support the Army Corps of Engineers dredging the Bay. But what they do with that dredged material is they typically just throw it away in the ocean. And that means that the natural attenuation that happens with the sediment and the sand to the shoreline is just lacking because there's no sediment and sand there to move to the beaches and move to the wetlands area. So we have sued the Army Corps for this really wasteful practice and are challenging them. And that's something that the restoration agencies really support because they would love to get this clean sediment into their wetlands restoration projects to make it all faster, you know, because right now that's pretty slow. It's a pretty slow process to restore these wetlands.
One other question, how do you prioritize your work?
Oh, that's a great question. We just actually went through a pretty robust planning process to figure out our priorities for the next few years. So what we do is our scientists, I put our scientists in a room and I don't let them out until they come up with the exhaustive list of everything that could harm the Bay. And then we take that and we filter it through a bunch of different kind of factors. And so we're looking at, you know, what's harming the community, what's harming the fish, what's harming the actual restoration areas that we're talking about, and what are the biggest threats. So I have them rank the biggest threats. And then we take our lawyers and our advocates and we say, well, what can we actually do about this problem? Where can we have the most impact? And are there other groups working on this? Should we just support them? Or should we take this on our own because there's something different that we can bring to it? So we went through this whole process just recently. We came up with over, I would say, 60 different threats. We ranked them all. We narrowed it down to about 18. Then we narrowed it down further based on what we actually have the resources and the right tools to affect change on. And we're now down to about 8 major priorities that we work on. So that's how we prioritize.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are working on holding the industry accountable. That's kind of our specialty. We also are working on holding cities accountable for a lot of the municipal pollution that comes off of our streets. So this is really high levels of bacteria and trash down in San Jose. We're also currently in litigation against the cities of Sunnyvale and Mountain View for toxic levels of bacteria in their creeks. We've got things like tackling toxic hotspots. These are these shoreline areas that are low-lying, more than 1,100 different sites that are going to be inundated by sea level rise. And all of that toxic pollution is going to just leach into the bay and into nearby communities unless we act now to protect those areas. So we're going city by city, talking to them about what areas they need to be protecting, and we're making recommendations for how to protect those areas. That's 3. We're also really involved in the drought and the issues with the salmon and the smelt right now. We have a lawsuit against the Biden administration actually for failing to list the longfin smelt as an endangered species. That would actually help a lot of the water diversions. It would stop a lot of the water diversions because they would have to protect the smelt, and right now the smelt are just dying. So a lot of different activities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounds like that's it for questions. Thank you guys so much. It was nice chatting with you.
Thank you very, very much, Sejal. It was a great talk.
Great.
And in case you hadn't noticed, if you look on the screen, she was silly enough to put looks like her email address. And so also, I'm sure that when you go to their, I know when you go to their website, you will find a donate button. So if you feel so inclined to support their great work, that's one way you can do it. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, next up on the agenda, if my memory serves me correctly, is Mr. Adrian is going to give his update on, I can either give you this mic or you can take your preference.
Oh, hello. Yes. Okay. This is kind of weird. I've got a bunch of people in front of me here. I've got a bunch of people in front of me there. Okay. Anyhow, so the Rossmore Solar Initiative continues to progress. At this point, mutuals 3, 8, and 70 have all signed an engagement letter and are starting their feasibility analysis work with Sage Energy and with Table Rock. Third Mutual's furthest along in that process, but still not very far. And what we're discovering as we do this is that this is in some ways far more a process. It's a journey, not a deliverable. It's not like, here's the facts and baba boom, you get an action plan of some sort. This is very much a discovery journey as we start to work with Sage and we start to work with Table Rock. We really need to start realizing this is a three-cornered conversation where we all try and figure out, okay, how can we solve this problem? We have these 3 objectives of limiting the cost of PG&E power, putting a cap on it, of increasing the resilience of power for Rossmore, for the residents here, so that we don't have to worry about power safety shutoffs as much and outages. And we also have the objective of trying to use some of the savings from solar to renew some of our infrastructure, and particularly maybe do something about electric vehicles, and enable electric vehicles to be recharged more readily. So we have those three objectives, but how do we go about actually using solar power to accomplish those objectives? It's not necessarily quite so immediately obvious as it was, as we might have thought it was. And there are some interesting opportunities showing up as the regulatory scene changes. And so we're exploring those. And I think over the next month or so, it may become a little more clear just exactly how we could really move forward. So it's an interesting journey. And several other mutuals, particularly Mutual 4 and Mutual 2, are fairly along in the process of actually deciding whether they want to join in on this. And it would be great if they did that. So with that, I'll pause, and if there's any questions, Tom? Mutual 1, the question was, has Mutual 1 completely dropped their plans? The answer is no, not entirely, but their board is in a state of flux. They're a couple of one member just recently resigned and was replaced by somebody else. There's a second member who is going to be replaced in October, and that one it's known who is going to take over. I can't remember the name now, but it is known who's taking over. And then in the third one, there's going to be an election between an existing member and a challenger. And so in October, there'll be a different board at First Mutual, and they may reach a different decision or a different approach and be more proactive about it, or not. Who knows? Are there any questions through the chat? No? Okay, well, with that, I'll surrender the mic.
Hey, and thank you very much, Adrian. And actually, if you'd give me 60 seconds, I just think it's only appropriate for me to explain real quickly to Sejal what she just was exposed to. Last fall, Adrian, who was the chair of our Renewable Energy Committee, had the idea to look into putting up, rather than solar panels on individual people's homes, their condos, is to do it on a HOA-wide basis, with the ultimate objective of then, getting enough to do it. We could then form one or multiple microgrids here in Rossmore. And so he found a partner organization in Marin County that said, we've had some experience in doing things like this. We'd love to help you with it. And so Adrian has been working his butt off. I'm willing to bet at this point, he's got to have, Carol, he probably has at least 300 hours into this thing in the last, just even the last 3 or 4 months, right? At least. So, and we're making progress, against, what's the title? Was that the title of an old movie, Against All Odds? Feels like that. Okay, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, which I believe just happens to be me, and the president's message. And we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. I'm not going to try and bring up the slide deck again because I want to share the screen on the other laptop. But you've heard me say, I know last month I talked about, that since one of our overarching organizational objectives is to increase our ability to combat climate change. And we're always looking for campaigns that we can take on, to help in that. And we're looking for campaigns that will hit at least a couple, 3 different criteria. One is, it's obviously got to be something that we can do from Rossmore, right? A campaign that's really effective, but it's down in South America, won't do us a lot of good here. It's got to be something that we can bring something to bear that either they don't have or that plays into strong suits or resources that we do have. And it's also got to be something that will have a meaningful impact on combating climate change. And so one of the reasons I mentioned that last time, I'm mentioning it again, is we can continuously need all of you to keep your radar tuned up for ideas that you come across that might be something that would hit those criteria that we should dive deeper into and work on. And so I just happened to have seen within the last week a video on CNN that struck me. I'll confess, it grabbed me because I think it has the potential to hit those three criteria. And given the fact that it's dealing with oceans, I thought it might be appropriate to introduce it tonight, right in back of Sejal's talk about Baykeeper. So there's a 13-minute video. We don't have to watch the full 13 minutes. You'll get the message within the first 5 or 6 minutes. So let me see if I can bring that up and start that. Okay, and you should too.
These ecosystems, there are forgotten forests.
They are home to over 700 species at some point during their life stage.
Without them, those species that need that habitat are essentially homeless.
What we've seen is catastrophic loss, the near complete disappearance of massive kelp forests in just a few years.
The purple sea urchins, once they eat all the kelp, then the kelp forests are actually gone.
So these urchin are in a zombie state.
They were everywhere. They were on top of each other.
This is a climate-driven ocean catastrophe. Taking no action is not an option.
Imagine you're a bird. If you could dive from the top of the redwood forest as a bird, it's like flying through a kelp forest underwater. So you're gonna see the different canopies, you're gonna see different species along the way. It's gonna be this entire ecosystem thriving out there that you didn't even know was right off of your coast because it's underwater.
Kelp forests are probably the most important marine habitat that most people have never heard of. And they cover about 25% of the world's coastline. Taken together, kelp forests cover 360 million acres around the world, which is a footprint that's 5 times larger than tropical coral reefs. And they actually rival tropical rainforests in terms of the incredible amount of carbon that they're able to fix. So these are some of the fastest growing organisms on the planet, and they're fixing tremendous amounts of carbon. And that's important for the health and balance of the entire planet.
It's amazing what kelp can do. It's amazingly resilient to storms and big wave events and hot water, but you can't keep throwing all that at it all the time. So the increased frequency and intensity associated with climate change, the water stays warmer longer than it should. The waves are bigger and frequently more damaging than it used to be. All that just starts to undercut this amazingly resilient kelp forest.
So along California's north coast, we've seen the massive loss of 96% of our bulk kelp forests, and we lost them in less than a decade. So imagine for a minute that we lost 96% of the big trees in the Sierras. That would be front page news every single day. We'd be seeing a mass mobilization to deal with an ecosystem collapse.
In California, we had what was called the warm blob. It was a gigantic blob of warm water, a marine heat wave, that stuck around for about 3 years, beginning in 2013.
We know that warm water is less conducive for kelp. Kelp like cold, rich water. And we know also that that warm water event probably exacerbated or made worse the sea star wasting syndrome.
A lot of people, when they think of top predators in the ocean, they might think of something like a shark. And that's exactly what you should be thinking about when you think about the sunflower star. And this sunflower star is a very mobile star that will roam around looking for food, moving their little tiny feet underneath to glide across the seafloor and then strike fear into organisms that they encounter. So when they eat, they actually swallow the entire prey whole. Starting in about 2013, there was a syndrome that started to appear all up and down the west coast of North America, where sea stars of all varieties started to show this wasting syndrome, which is this horrible effect that causes the sea stars to essentially melt. Sunflower stars were really, really hard hit, and they were down in this region to probably 5% of their historical numbers, and in some areas in the south, like off of California, we haven't seen sunflower stars for years.
The sunflower sea star was the last remaining predator that was actually keeping purple urchins populations under control. And those purple urchin, which are a native species, they're part of the ecosystem, but as their abundance increased so drastically, they've clear-cut the kelp forests on the north coast. And so they've basically transitioned thriving, abundant kelp forest ecosystems into low diversity, unproductive urchin barrens. Because the purple urchin have eliminated their primary food source, they're basically starving, but they can persist there for a long time. They're in that zombie state. They can live in that low energy mode for years.
Urchins and urchin barrens have very little food, calories or nutrition, so they're simply empty eggshells with spines, and no predator is going to waste their time trying to eat them.
When a predator that's a key member of an ecosystem like sunflowers.
Okay, I think I'll stop it there because I think you get the idea. The idea clearly is that actually several things. One is we've got an opportunity if we choose to take advantage of it, is to work on a project like this to try and help recover some portion of the kelp forest. I will admit that I take this very personally, and reason why it hit me is that I first learned to scuba dive over 40 years ago, and I learned to dive in Monterey Bay, and I dove a good portion of the California coast, and especially back then, you go diving and you saw the pictures of the kelp forest with a kelp here, another one 10 feet away, another. It didn't used to be like that. Just within 100 yards off the beach in Monterey, the kelp was so thick, it was difficult for a diver to swim through it. As a matter of fact, the divers were schooled to be very careful in diving in kelp forest because the kelp was so thick and so tangly that you ran the risk of getting entwined in it and not being able to get loose and be caught there until your air ran out. And also, the sea life is incredibly prolific, diverse. It's amazing, and I'm kind of sad that the vast majority of you have never had the experience of being down in the bottom of the ocean in a spot like Monterey Bay, where the marine life is so rich and so incredible. And so again, so this is a topic that I bring it up as an example of what we would like you all to be keeping your radar tuned up for, to find things like this, because I'm willing to bet that and we can find projects just in watching this video and talking to some of the people that we can pick their brains of, to find some one or more campaigns in there that will meet the three primary targets. especially since, as you probably may have picked up on, one person they interviewed said kelp grows incredibly fast and sequesters a lot of carbon. You know, and so it's got more potential, to, reduce, the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere than planting terrestrial trees, the sea trees. So, and with that note, I'm going to, and chat says that, Amanda and Dave Casey are divers too. So with that note, I'm going to get off my soapbox, and I think they turn over to, I think Barry's Carol up next on the agenda for. Oh, Dave Casey, are you gonna? Oh, that means we need to bring the agenda back up, and
Dave,
Dave.
you can unmute yourself now. Oh, you are muted. Good.
Where? I think it's that one. I think it's that one. I think it's I'm right there. And you guys didn't think I could do it. Of course, I didn't think I could do it either. And we did that. That was President's message, and and as you see down the bottom of that slide is the link to the entire video if you want to watch the whole thing. There's not that much more left of it, but it's good, definitely worthwhile. We'll send that out. Okay, and Dave, you're up, and I can drive the slides.
Hi, my name's Dave Casey, and as part of the upping our game to try to slow down and reverse climate change, one of the many things that we have found out is that the way we eat not only affects who we are, what we are, but it affects our planet as well. So the Planet Friendly Eating team is working primarily to reduce livestock, especially beef, maybe not eliminate it, but to try to get people here at Rossmore and Walnut Creek to reduce their impact on livestock. Reduce their impact on the world by reducing the prevalence of livestock, especially beef and dairy. So we have a group that meets. We used to eat together, but since the pandemic, of course, we haven't. But we'd like anyone who's interested to contact us. And I think there's a couple more slides too. Coming up this fall, there's a reducetarian, which are people who are working to reduce their meat intake, not eliminate it, but reduce it and try other plant-based foods. There's a fantastic summit in San Francisco in October. I learned it was on. I don't know what the story is now, but I suspect it is still on. So it's a fantastic big hall event with participants from all over the world with all kinds of information, and we're going to go. It's a really fun thing. I guess showcasing delicious plant-based foods and many, many other related climate crisis things at the Reducerian Summit. If you wanted to find out more about it, if you use Instagram, you can follow the Reducetarians on Instagram or probably Facebook, although I don't do Facebook. And there's probably one more.
I think that's it.
Well, that's it. Oh, sorry. Okay, so if you'd like to find out more about planet-friendly eating and reducing climate change by diet, because what we eat is the world we live in, come and join us. Thanks.
Great, and thank you very much, Dave. And Amanda, because I know, Dave, you're not doing it all by yourself.
Yes.
Okay, Carol.
On? Okay, good. So I just want to mention while we're on the planet friendly eating that one of the members, Laurel Stanley, had a good connection with the Creekside Grill, and the manager there, lo behold, found out that he's vegetarian. And although you wouldn't know it from the menu that has been existing, he plans to add a lot more things that have protein choices that are, you know, are more varied. So look for some changes in the menu. Talking about trash, we have a change of venue. We used to meet in, is this working okay? Oh, the top half of my head. All right. I have to see my mask as well. So we're going to be meeting in the bunker room. We had our first meeting last month after a year. We'd been having some big webinar presentations, but we hadn't had the group meetings. And it was really fantastic to discover the advances that people had made in their communities. Certainly not everyone, but for example, Marilyn Hopper, one of the members in her entry, took it upon herself to go to every single door in her entry. There were 24. The first time around, she visited 20 people. She went back and visited the 4 who weren't home. And she says it's made an amazing change in her entry and then in trash enclosure there. And we've had that experience before and shared that the real way to make change isn't by putting up signs and writing letters. Those are important. They can sometimes impact somebody who wants to know the information, but the real way to make change is eye to eye, talking with people in small groups or one-on-one. So that's a continuing trend, and we'll be having more success stories. Marilyn actually got not a standing ovation, but it's the first time in a trash talk meeting that the whole room clapped when she talked about getting all 24 people. And before we had to end the meeting, we had just started talking about solutions for dealing with residents who are moving in and moving out, and often family members who are moving out and emptying a condo, and inappropriate use of our trash enclosures, often because they don't know any better. So we'll be picking that up and dealing with that at our next meeting on the 18th. And in the September meeting, we'll also be in the bunker room. So I think that's it about trash. Oh, you can see the move out trash. I think that's actually moving in trash that's pictured in the picture there. Something like that, you'd call MOD and they come and pick it up and charge your mutual because some family member dumped out that. Okay, can we advance to, do I do something to advance it?
Yeah, and just hit enter.
Oh, good.
Lena, do you have a question?
A question or comment?
Well, I'm just asking that Lena Birch on Zoom had her hand raised, and
Oh, okay. I'm going to tell you about the film we're going to have. This will be the first time that Sustainable Rossmore has been back in Peacock Hall in over a year. We've been saving this. Actually, that's not true. We had Damnation last month, and about 20 people showed up and had a great discussion. That was on removing obsolete dams. Okay, that's a film we'd say. This one we've had on hold a while because it's a really terrific film. Many people saw it in the theater, and
share and restart it in order to.
okay.
We don't have it on video, right?
And recording, no.
This. Okay, and if we can, we're going to try to get the trailer showing. But in any case, as you can see, there's Mark Ruffalo, Anne Hathaway, Tim Robbins, and Bill Pullman are starring in Dark Waters. It's based on a true story of an attorney who took on DuPont. Dow, in case you didn't know, Dow has a big chemical company right here in Contra Costa in Martinez. And about several of their forever products. The most famous one being Teflon. Oh, so it won't work? Phooey. Is there another way to do it? I did, okay. So we'll have the film. People need to wear masks when you come. It's not tomorrow, but it's the following Wednesday. So that's the 11th. Dale Harrington has volunteered to be the discussant afterwards. And that doesn't mean he has to know everything. It means he encourages people in the audience who do know everything. It's amazing. The people that come to films often have had personal experiences, knowledge based on the subjects of the film, and are able to share it with the rest of us. So we learn a lot. And that discussion is voluntary. So people often come just see the film and leave, but you can also stay for the discussion afterwards, which lasts as long as there's comments or questions, and we pass mobile, handheld mics like this one around the audience. And the miraculous Barry Bryant may be able to get us a preview of this.
And Carol, Joy's asking what time is the film on the 11th?
The film is on at 7 o'clock. So for future films, they're always on the third Wednesday of the month. Nope, correct that. Second Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. in Peacock.
West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains.
Hi, Grammars.
What are you doing here?
Your grandma tells me her grandson's some fancy environment lawyer down in Cincinnati.
I am a corporate defense attorney.
So?
I defend chemical companies.
Well, now you can defend me.
How many did you lose?
190.
190 cows.
You tell me nothing's wrong here.
It's a small matter for a family friend. Help a guy who needs it.
The farmer or you? That's chemicals, I'm telling you.
I'm seeing documents I don't understand. They're hiding something. That chemical. What if you drank it?
Drink it. It's like saying, what if I swallowed a tire?
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
At DuPont, better living through chemistry. It's our DNA.
You need to tell me what in the hell's going on.
DuPont is knowingly poisoning 70,000 local residents for the last 40 years. You knew, still you did nothing.
You want to flush your career down the toilet for some cowhand?
You want to take everything that you know and turn it against.
Oh, there's I'm sorry, you had a question or comment?
What town is the movie based on?
7 p.m. The town, I'm sorry, it's in Ohio. All I know is it's Ohio. Yep. And the real attorney is still living in Ohio and trying cases. They had a lot of class action suits, and this has been going on for 40 years. He's finally, after years of persevering, winning cases and helping thousands of people each time. As you can imagine, Dow Chemical is and DuPont are very big and can make things drag on forever, hoping that he'll give up. And it was nominated for,
Doesn't matter, we're done.
I'm sorry, I'm forgetting which now, Telluride, I think it was, Film Festival, and won. And the real attorney accepted the award at the film festival for the film. For somebody in Ohio? Yes, there are actually. It's a film that has subtitles, and whenever they're available, we always add them. Are you pulling my leg, Bob, or is there a reason? People from Ohio are sort of hard to understand. Is that the comment you're making? Yeah, well, the volume was an issue going through so many different techie medium here. I have a different, changing the subject, an announcement. Sustainable Rossmore formed a coalition with several other environmental groups in the Bay Area and have been working for over a year. So that includes Sustainable Contra Costa, 350 Contra Costa, 350 Bay Area Action, Sunflower Alliance, and today, oh, that's all right if they can't see me. Hello. All right. And after a lot of preparation work and meeting with individual supervisors of the Board of Supervisors of Contra Costa, they voted today 4-1 in favor of a natural gas ban on all new buildings in the unincorporated part of Contra Costa. So that includes residential, offices, hotels, industrial buildings, and so forth. So it's not going to involve retrofitting. Nobody who has their gas stove now is going to have it ripped out of their hands, but it's going to make it's the single most impactful thing that we can do to reduce greenhouse gases in California with one swift action of banning. And 48 other communities have already done this in California to have a natural gas ban. It means the buildings go all electric. There's no plumbing for a gas line to the buildings. It's also something I learned in the process, the amount of pollution indoors for people that have a gas range or gas heater is several times higher than pollution outdoors and exceeds on every single chemical that's related to burning fossil fuels that's illegal on the outside. So it's incredible the amount of toxins you're breathing if you have natural gas in your house. So if you can get organized and retrofit your own place and install a heat pump and do the other things that are necessary. In some of our condos, it actually means bringing in more power. Fortunately, they have clever things that are techie things that are that moderate the amount of flow so that even with modest amount of electrical supply to a condo, it's possible to still power all the things that you need to in your condo without using natural gas. So it's entirely possible, and a lot of people are doing what's called decarbonizing their dwellings. But that's not what the Board of Supervisors voted on today. They only focused on new buildings because it's a lot easier to start there. So I think I'll stop talking and let you
And I would like to make sure that everyone is fully aware that Carol, once again, was being her too modest self, and the year-long effort of the various environmental groups that worked on passing this, obviously she played a key role in that. But she won't tell you that. But fortunately, I can, and I will. So as you can probably guess, from until further notice, on all our future meetings will be by Zoom only, right, Barry? And until we get clearance to be back in person, because it's nice to have the hybrid meeting like this, but as I said earlier, and as you can get a better feel for, the technology is probably 3 times more challenging than doing either. They don't want to see me. Oh, and when Carol was answering the question about what town that was, and she says it's in Ohio, my first instinct was to make a snarky remark that everything is bad about Ohio because I'm from Michigan. So And so does anybody have any last minute questions, suggestions, comments? Yeah.
I'm Elaine Katie, 1229. I have not
I don't think it's on, Barry.
the
Yeah.
the only community that I've actually seen is the one in Davis with 200 homes, Village Homes. In fact, the last time I was there, or one of the times I was there, Francois Mitterrand was coming in with a helicopter to take a look at it, but then France later went, oh gosh. Anyhow, I wonder if there's any films on the community that went up, a solar community, I think in Humboldt, which I've never seen. Maybe there's a film on it. And maybe there's a film on each year the universities have some kind of contest with the different solar homes that they build. I'm way behind on it. Maybe that's all available online. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know of any either. Yeah, Carol might know.
I want to thank you, Elaine, because many of our best suggestions for films come from members. So I will research that. But you do remind me that one of the films that someone recommended is going to be featured for the county, and it includes kelp forests. And that is part of the Green Sofa Cinema series. And you'll be reading about that in the Rossmore News. And also, if you're a member of Sustainable Rossmore, you'll get a MailChimp that gives you the link. It's a film that you can watch on YouTube at home. And then there's a discussion if you want to participate on Zoom. But if you're asking me right now the name of the movie, I can't remember it. I'm blocking. I'm sorry. But that information will be available both in the Rossmore News and on. But I'm gonna. I've made notes, and I'm gonna get back to you on that.
Great, thanks, Carol. Okay, in that note, I think what we're going to do is we're going to call, unless anybody has any last minute words of wisdom, we're going to call this
Brad.
Dale.
Yeah, I want to point out that you can look in the Rossmore News tomorrow, but the day after is where you can donate clothes and shoes for White Pony Express. And so if you have things that you can donate, look in the paper because they have listed the kind of items that are important for them to be able to pass along to people in need. And I've had such a tremendous response so far that White Pony Express is actually going to be bringing a truck on Thursday for us to load everything into. I already filled my car up completely, and Patty and I took it there. I'm picking up items for another resident tomorrow who can't drop them off. So I don't want to waste your time. I just want to point that out. So if you have items you can share to people in need, please come at 10 o'clock at Gateway.
Great, and that's really good to know, Dale. Do you know off the top of your head if they would take Aloha shirts? My wife would love me to get rid of the last 20 that I've been holding on to.
I'm sure they would take them as long as they don't have food all over them.
Oh no, I'm very protective of these shirts. I mean, yeah. And then seriously, when I moved into Paul with Paula 5 years ago, I had 40 of them. Yeah.
Oh Lord. Oh.
Hey Barry. Good job. And Carol just wanted to give Barry a round of applause for all of his technology service. Okay, and thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening, what's left of it, and the week. Thanks. Bye.